Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Top Cyber Pro podcast. I'm Jim West, founder and CEO of TopCyberPro.com. And today, you've probably noticed I got a couple other screens here on the screen for you. I actually have two guests on the podcast, and I'm really, really happy and enthusiastic about this podcast because if you recall, a few weeks ago, I had Irfan on the podcast talking about CSI Linux, and he had a phenomenal story about his life, what brought him into cyber, and talking a lot about OSINT. And then through continued discussion, I actually had Alex reach out to me, who had saw the podcast, and I'm really enthusiastic because we said, hey, it'd be great if you guys could do a demo and show us, a little peek under the hood of what the capabilities of CSI Linux with Navi can do. But before we get into all to the technical stuff and the show me, tell me, and show me part of this podcast, I want to actually allow each of you guys to kind of introduce yourselves, who you are, what you do, and just a little bit of fun facts about yourself. So let's start with you, Vince.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Vincent Aliquo. I am the current VP of Engineering for Haiku Inc. And so I oversee all product development for all of their products, which teaches cybersecurity, both for people who are just started cybersecurity or for even experts or people who are just novices trying to really kind of elevate their experience. And through that, I've been able to get in contact with Alex here. So he was one of our technical writers to allow us to, build out some lessons and content that we're pushing out. And notice that Alex here was actually working on this cool AI project that was all cybersecurity related. And then ultimately, as kind of like an assistant AI that we'll kind of dive into, it really kind of jived with me a little bit, and it's something that I wanted to work on as well. I kind of went more into the managerial side of things, and so it was really refreshing to kind of really just dive in and work on a new code base, especially, and start kind of getting my hands dirty again. So that has been an absolute pleasure so far. So, but that's pretty much what I do now.
Okay. Alex, yourself?
Hi, my name is Alex. I'm actually the founder and director of a cybersecurity startup called Saint Security Group LLC. There's a long and involved history behind the group itself. However, I kind of got my foundations with what I'm doing today through Haiku in a very, very roundabout way. So I'd been practicing cybersecurity on and off for close to 13 years. So I had a lot of practical knowledge up in my head, but I never had a proper place to actually focus that in. So I started working with Haiku as a technical writer, as Vincent said, and it kind of just springboarded everything else that happened with what we're doing today. So Navi is actually kind of, in a way, a little bit of a byproduct of my work with Haiku, as well as a very, very long-term goal of mine since I was a teenager, but that's for later. So that being said, we started working on Navi maybe, I don't know, two and a half years ago. And it's really impressive at how far it's gotten and how much attention it's gotten. So that's what we're hoping to convey today.
Okay. So you mentioned Navi got kind of started about 2 years ago. Now, from what I've read, Navi has got a back-end tie-in to Echo AI. Is that correct?
That is actually a former version of it.
Former version. So the
And
current
Navi,
version is now its own substantiated version.
its own in a way. We're actually
Okay.
working on our own custom model from the ground up as we speak. However, right now, for proof of concept purposes, we're actually using Llama 3 with a custom prompt added to it.
Okay. What are some of the challenges when you are trying to train an AI system? Because you hear a lot of this when people start getting into the know-how of how AI systems are developed and built. What are some of the challenges you guys have had to deal with in training your AI?
The first and foremost would have to be hardware. If you don't have the right hardware for it, you're going to be waiting. I think I read somewhere to train a proper version of Llama 3 from the ground up with a graphics card that's got, I think, 10 gigabytes of RAM. That can take upwards of a day and a half. So if you're using just your standard everyday laptop, that goes up exponentially.
Hmm. Okay.
So
Um,
that would be first and foremost.
So I want to kind of talk more about your guys' careers, and let's kind of go into the time machine. Alex, you mentioned about 13 years ago you kind of got started, but let's go back to that day one when you made the decision. The younger version of yourself said, "Hey, this IT cyber world is where I want to take myself into." And what's the story around it? And what were some of the first steps, or maybe even mentors or other people you looked up to when you got your career started?
All right, so it all kind of formed back whenever I was in middle school yet. So that was, yeah, it was about 13 years ago, maybe longer. I forget. Time kind of blurs at this point in my life. But yeah, it started in middle school. I'd actually tried to get a copy of OpenSUSE way back when, and I absolutely hated it because for some reason or another, my laptop at the time just got fried. And I was like, okay, I need another operating system for this. Windows isn't working right now. How do I fix this? So we went to Ollie's, of all places, and they had the old Linux Bibles that had the DVDs in them still. So I picked up a copy of the OpenSUSE Bible, slapped the disc in, loaded it up. It worked, but it just wasn't, it didn't have that pop, you know? So for a while, I kind of swore off Linux. But then I came back around whenever I discovered Ubuntu, like I'm sure most people who get into Linux do. That's like baby's first Linux.
Yeah.
um, so I kind of fell in love with Ubuntu. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, somebody at some point in time told me you learn Linux, you learn how to hack. So I got to thinking, okay, well, maybe there's a very specific distribution for hacking. You look it up, and of course, you find Hackers First Linux, Kali, or at the time, Backtrack 4. So that kind of dates it a little bit. I ran Backtrack 4 as a daily driver for about, I don't know, a year and a half. I didn't really do too much with it because, again, you read almost any book and it'll tell you it's almost like the Matrix whenever Neo says guns, lots of guns, tools, lots of tools. And as a person with ADHD, that can be a little bit impairing. So I didn't really get truly into network security until, I don't know, maybe a couple years after high school. I started like truly dabbling in it. I picked up a few books on Humble Bundle, started reading them, kind of found that I really liked what I was doing, and it kind of just bloomed from there.
Okay, awesome.
As far as mentors go, I didn't really truly have too many mentors until about 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I first started like actually taking it seriously. At that point, I didn't really know what I was doing, who I was affiliating with, but a series of very fortunate events led me to the Raices Cyber Discord. Raices Cyber is an organization that mostly focuses on Hispanic representation within the cybersecurity community. Bless them, because they actually gave me my first speaker spot at their conference last year. I'll be returning this year. In fact, I just got my invite the other day.
Congrats.
But it was one of those situations where I talked up enough people that I don't know if you've gathered this or not, but I'm kind of tenacious. I see something I want to go for it. So I ended up talking to the head of Raices Cyber one day, and I go, "Hey, I don't know if you know who I am, but I'm the new guy here." And he goes, "Oh, I know who you are." And I'm like, "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" And his response was the very, very traditional, "If you need to ask, then you already know." So I'm not going to go into the full story of how I got in there, but it was rather interesting. From there, I actually made my way into Haiku because I saw that their lead of marketing was a member of Raices. So I'm like, hey, this Haiku thing's really cool. Is there any way that I can help with it? And I don't know, about a month passed, and finally, the marketing guy hits me up and goes, "Hey, how would you like an interview with our writing director, or one of our writing directors?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So that's how I got into Haiku, and then from Haiku, Navi kind of formed into its own thing uh, that was more or less just concept in my head for close to 18 years up to that point. So that's how I got from where I was to where I am today.
Awesome. Vincent, what's your story of what got you into IT cyber?
Yeah, so I it's a little bit different, I suppose, because I actually was more interested in video game development more than anything else. And so I've always been programming since like I was like, around 9, 10 or whatever. But always through the lens of actually building interactive experiences. So, started in C and then kind of going through building out with like actually the languages got a little bit higher level as I kind of went on. And so I was always building and tinkering, building new graphical applications and little games and software, usually for other people. I always wanted to build things that other people could interact with rather than it be something that I just use personally. And I always loved being able to find a problem and build a graphical solution to it and then give it to somebody. And I really enjoyed seeing other people actually appreciate it. And if it helps some, that's all the better. Right. And so I really I built a whole, I think it was like a 2.5 hour top down 2D video game with like a full original soundtrack when I was like in high school that went on Steam. And then I actually went to school also for game design as well. Right. So I was building all sorts of applications there. But of course, there was a whole artistic bent to that as well. Right. Um, but through that, I was able to actually learn the entire stack of both, audio engineering, 3D development, illustrations, and of course, programming. So I was introduced a bit more towards Unity, which is what we use primarily for the Haiku product, Unreal, and so on and so forth. But I like technical things. It's all the puzzle problem solving. And so I did a lot of freelance work from that point. I actually went as both a web director for was it District and some radios and things like that. And really just kind of after a while, I found a position that Haiku had open at the time that really needed that type of really explicit like game design experience. At that point, I did a lot of tutoring and a lot of just teaching for programming, whether it's through Python or through, Java. I think I even had some Java tutorial videos as well that I built out on YouTube that got some traction at that time. And it turns out that I just really loved teaching people how to code and just teaching people technical things in general. And so paired with game design experience, turned out to be a really nice mixture for Haiku because that is very explicitly what it was doing. It wanted to build a graphical,
I think you went on
education.
mute. There you go. Okay.
Yeah. So it was just pairing it with education as well. And so this worked pretty well, especially when it comes to Navi, which is all Python based primarily, but at its core, right, it's really an accessibility product, right? It's something that, the core audience is someone who isn't necessarily an expert to be able to use it, right? And so turns out there's a lot of methodologies that we had to implement through Haiku that really made Navi really tantalizing to start to work on, right? And really flesh out and make that far more interesting and interactive. And so through and through, everything just kind of works. And so I never expected to really get into cyber as much as I've had to. But it all kind of fell together in some like really wonderful way.
I really like, how sometimes just life and the planets align, right? And
Exactly.
there's something you mentioned that with education, I'm a big proponent of education, whether it's through the STEM and our young generations to go into STEM careers, or now I think they've added the A for arts, STEAM. And then, you mentioned another thing about gamification is basically the word that you hear a lot about with training, where you kind of come up with a way to
Right.
gamify it to give more incentive for the user to be more invested. Because we got a lot of training. Like I work in the defense sector, and there's so much DoD training, which is just click next, next. You just brute force to the end, and you get your little certificate, go about your life. That's zero effectiveness because there's no buy-in from the end user, and they don't care. It's just noise. And so when you find a way to get some investment in from who you're trying to educate your audience, that's really powerful stuff when you start doing it the right way. But with that being said, it brings me to a fun question. I like to throw in some fun questions every now and then in podcasts to kind of keep levity up because we are talking a lot of deep stuff we're about to get into. But before we get into that, you mentioned video games. So what's your favorite video game of all time and why?
Oh, it's Metal Gear Solid 3 has been throughout my absolute
Yes.
hands down. I've replayed that game dozens of times. And all the difficulties. I love the whole Metal Gear Solid series, and just something about the whole, like, that whole Soviet Cold War theme was such a blast. And I always loved being able to, you're kind of, it's super campy, right? But it's also super serious at the same time. And I feel like it just balances that so beautifully that it just keeps you engaged mechanically.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Such a treat. All the experimentation, mechanic. Oh, such a I love everything about Metal Gear Solid series. Even though the story is, of course, can be a bit convoluted at
Yeah.
times, but it's that's my top. But overall, I love maybe like under 10 hours indie games, something that is just creative, fun, concise, to the point. I'm busy as all hell always. And so being able to sit down and know that I can complete something within a reasonable amount of time, see the actual end, 100 hours, I'm not going to touch it.
Awesome.
10 hours sounds good to me.
How about yourself, Alex?
All right, so springboarding off of that, I just for my birthday picked up the entire Metal Gear Solid Legacy collection for my
Oh,
Switch.
perfect. There we go.
So, unfortunately, as cool as Snake can be, um, I have to go with Mega Man Battle Network,
Okay.
which is actually where Navi gets its namesake from.
Okay.
So throughout the series, there are the like AIs that are housed on people's phones called net navies. So it's like, okay, 1 and 1 is 2. There's a very like kind of loose cybersecurity theme to the whole game because it's based around an alternative version of the Mega Man universe where we see the world more dominated by a network as opposed to robots.
Okay.
So it kind of struck home. And as a teenager playing these games for the first time, I thought to myself, that would be really cool. How do I do it? So
Okay.
that's one more chunk of the story right there. But the gameplay was just as a teenager, I didn't really know how to play games that well, which is a surprise. I was for a little while a professional gamer. Um, but it was a situation where I didn't quite know how to play it. So going back to it again now, it's like, oh, I can just breeze right through these. So there's your 10-hour gameplay right there.
Yeah.
At least for a single copy of Mega Man Battle Network. There's like some 6 games in the series.
Well, for
So
me, it's been Fallout. I've because of the series on Amazon, I revisited the game Fallout 4, and I discovered something in my personal private life. I hate to collect anything. Like I'll get rid of garbage. I don't like to have clutter. But in the game, you just end up collecting everything and just
mhm.
hoarding so much stuff.
Yeah.
I think in my current save file, I have like almost 200,000 caps, and I have just a glutton treasure trove of junk. But if the game only had made it to where it physically occupied space in the game, I'd probably have a big junk pile over my where I kind of base myself in the game out of. But one of the things I loved what the Fallout did was it gave you a lot of what the freedom of options and choices. Maybe not infinite levels of freedom, but it gave you, if you wanted to be a stealthy player, if you wanted to be a kind of run and gun, shoot first kind of player. But then it also gave you consequences for your choices. So I do love when people that are in development come up with ways to kind of make it interactive, get your buy-in. So kudos to you guys for doing something like that with the education of things that aren't always easy to convey to the average person. It takes a little bit of hand holding, if you will, to get that done. So this is the part I know a lot of people watching the podcast at this point are like, okay, when are we going to get to this demo? We were promised a demo, and these guys are just talking. So guess what? This is the moment where I'm going to turn over to Alex. Let me figure out how I do this. I think I just got to make you the host. Okay, you
All
are the
right.
host now, Alex.
Hey, what's up? Let's see. Share screen. We're actually going to pop right over here in Navi as it is. All right. So this is Navi as it sits. Command line interface mostly. Let's see here. What's something I can do right off the top of my head?
This is going to be the back end scenario here, right? So you can either, we're working on the graphical side of this, but for the CLI, right? It's going to work in tandem. So you can either use the CLI exclusively or use something that's a little bit more friendly as well, right? That kind of does some of the work for you there. But you can have both if you want.
Okay.
You can have your cake and you can eat it too. So I think one of the things I want to show off first about this is actually what do you think? Built-in system commands. Yeah, we'll go with the system commands first. So one of the things that I wanted Navi to be able to do whenever I was initially concepting it was this notion of having like a flowing conversation. So you can ask it your typical questions and it'll give you an actual AI response based on Llama 3. Or you can go one step further down and you can actually ask it to, say, for instance, list the contents of a directory. So let's go into, yeah, you know what? Contents of the /home/Alex directory. We're going to give that a second to churn up an answer. But what's interesting is it will actually ask you for permission to execute a shell command. So you say yes. It'll actually go through and give you your entire. Here, let me actually stretch this out a little bit.
Maybe that was not the best directory to. You seem to have a lot of files in there.
Yeah, I didn't have a.
I
didn't quite have a choice on that
process.
Yeah, you know what?
All right. Yeah, want to kill that process.
Yeah, my bad.
So there's two ways you can truly interface with this, right? So one is with those system commands that you have where you want it to actually generate a command to then execute on your machine. Or you can actually utilize something would be built-in commands or tools that we have built out, right? That leverage natural language processing to be able to actually go through and figure out what you want to do with the application and pass that through to that particular program that we wrote, which is also something which we're calling chips. Those chips as well can also be hosted on GitHub to be able to be queried and then also installed on your personal Navi instance as well, which we'll go through. So yeah, that's a little bit more concise.
That's a little bit more tame.
Yeah.
So
do you want to show some of the chips as well and maybe some of the examples of searching for something? I think we right now have our cryptography program. That might be a nice one to look through.
So right now there isn't actually any chips installed on that, which is a good thing.
Which is fine.
This from ground up.
Yeah.
So chips search, if I could spell properly, will actually bring up the current list of chips that are available. So the way you put a chip out there for us to be able to download and integrate into Navi is actually pretty simple. It's on GitHub. All of this is done through GitHub. And you tag it as, what is it, Navi-chip, all lowercase?
Yeah, it's just Navi chip.
And as long as there's a release within that repository, it'll show up on our side. Now, of course, there's going to be templating involved and more to it than just that. But on a low level, it's actually pretty clever how this is set up. So let's go install Cryptex real quick.
It does have to restart, so I don't know how that does with the video thing. It's going to kill your. Just install it. It's fine.
Yeah. We'll go through it and do the thing.
So it downloads. Oh, beautiful. There we go.
That was pretty fast. Let's go.
That was fast.
So now one of the ways we can check and see if this chip is installed is it'll actually show up within the built-in help menu. So coupling that, we can actually go chips list. It'll show up there as well. But then if you want to see more like drilled down info on it, chips Navi Cryptex. And if I'm not mistaken, yep, there we go. And then you can click on that, and it's probably not going to show because I'm only sharing the window for the command line. So let me fix that real quick. Let's see here.
And so this is actually quite a big project with a lot of subfolders and things like that. So, you know, we just keep track of all of the files in that particular package. So when we update and clean that up, we can, you know, make sure that we're updating the appropriate files. But you can see how we're kind of formatting it, right? We have a chips requirements thing that we go through to install the appropriate stuff. And then we have a really specific way in which you should formulate your chips, right? So that it can interface elegantly with our application. This is just our general cryptography library. So for example, if Alex, if you want to actually show maybe an example of one of the commands that Cryptex uses. Yeah, there's a lot of little tools in here to utilize.
So I think we're actually going to go with Caesar Cipher because it's probably one of my favorites. So Cryptex, if I could spell again. CC, TAC E, TAC T. Hello world.
While Alex is doing that, Vince, could you explain to the the new person watching this podcast what chips are?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, chips as a whole, right, are mini programs that can be installed and managed within the Navi interface, right? Chips are just programs that you can just host on GitHub. And as long as it's, as Alex noted, tagged with chip, Navi chip, right? And there is a release, it is discoverable, searchable by anyone, and they can just automatically just include it in their Navi instance to be able to use here, right? And so what we do, right, is when somebody has a question or something like that, like, oh, run an Nmap scan with on these ports on this IP, you know, they can just talk like that, right? And I grab all that information and then pass it off to the information to the program. So if you had like an Nmap library, an Nmap chip, right? I'm able to use natural language processing to deconstruct that and pass off all the useful information to you in your Navi chip to be able to process as you see fit. So whether you want to build like a little cybersecurity suite with a bunch of tools and installations, right? You can build that out, host on GitHub so that anyone else could access it directly through what we have provided here. We just want a nice, clean, modular interface.
And just to explain for people watching this, you know, people have heard in the news about how AI is enabling hackers and other threat agents out there to create at a faster exponential level malicious code, malicious programs faster than the way they were doing it before. And this is an example of when you're starting to use that same tactic, but for good. I think that's the best perspective I could give on it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Vince and Alex, but I think this is an instance where AI now has been leveraged to kind of combat the bad that's out there or help people to actually help cyber professionals with the strength of AI.
That is exactly it. Honestly, at the end of the day, that is exactly one of the main goals of Navi, is to be the good guy in that fight.
So I see you've done an Nmap scan here, and it's pretty fast, 7 seconds. What are some of the things we're doing here? Can you talk us through it, Alex?
All right, so at its very core, we actually have the setup that Navi can register the fact that you want to run an Nmap scan through plain text. So not just that, you can actually go and drill pretty deep into this. Can you do an nmap? Sorry. Nmap scan. Nmap scan. Sorry.
You don't need to say scan. I mean, it's just
That's okay.
so it'll be able to pull information like, oh, I'm mentioning
80.
ports, or like, hey, can I use, can you use ports, 2022 and 446, right? It'll be able to just using natural language processing to really try to drill out, pull down, as well as, of course, basic regex as well, right? Being able to truly and properly parse whatever is coming through, extracting the necessary parameters so that it could be found useful, because that sentence is not useful to a command prompt, right?
Yeah.
You really have to kind of go through. Yeah, there we go. That's actually quite nice. So that's a nice example. You can do an nmap scan of port 80, comma 22. You don't need to put that comma there. You can do space and whatever. And here it is. It's kind of, yeah, look at that. So yeah, so it just kicked that out actually. So that's nice. And so it can give you, I know he said analyze, but that's something that we also have the ability for, is that if you want, we can take out the output response from a command, and we could just pass it through. We do have the functionality for that. That all chips will also be able to access. So if you want your chip to pass the output out to our model to analyze and then give you the highlights, that's also something that it should be able to resolve, because that is also a pretty big problem, right? And really intimidating for people utilizing tools maybe like nmap, or maybe just anything that spits out an egregious amount of text, right?
Yes.
I don't want to parse through it.
I mean,
Potentially,
from just a
maybe
command
my
line
AI could
perspective,
do
a
it.
lot of folks are intimidated by command line stuff, because if you get one
Yes.
tack wrong, you get, one thing wrong, it doesn't work. But the fact that I'm seeing you ask it to do something like, can you do this nmat scan with these ports? Anybody could type that in. And then the fact that they don't need to know the syntax, the proper exact syntax to do that command, that's brilliant just off the start right there. Could you maybe give me a scenario where, let's say, I wanted to do, because I know there's a lot of capabilities in the platform, right? I was reading things about open source intelligence investigations, social media investigations, malware, network monitoring. Let's do maybe some network monitoring. Since you did some nmap scans, could you show an example of a network monitoring chip or capability?
Unfortunately, as of this point in time, we don't have that functionality built out as a chip. However, I will be getting to work on that type
Oh,
of
no
thing
worries.
very
Is there
soon.
another component that you can show us with Navi, like whether it's OSINT or social media?
Actually, yeah. In this case, I'm actually going to bounce over to the website, which is something I haven't quite shown off yet.
Oh, okay,
Let's see,
cool.
where are we here? So we
We
actually do
are
have.
actually using this to connect to the back end as well.
Yeah, this is Llama 3 based. So I actually have one of these set up already, because before I was. Do you know what case scenarios is by any chance?
Yeah.
All right, so I was actually using Navi to go through the first case on case scenarios. I don't have that chat backed up right now, mostly because whenever I did the update to the web user interface, it kind of wiped all that data from me. That's oversight on my part. I'll be figuring out how to fix that. So one of the things I can do is say, hey, Navi, let's team up on an investigation. Now we have to wait for server to give us our response. So give it a minute. So while we're actually waiting, I can go into some of the other finer details, what's going on here. First off, Navi has a ton of personality, which is one of the cool things that I love about it. And a lot of people have said that they love about it. Irfan himself referenced it as being this cute little AI. So Navi's personality will shine through, whether it's on web, on CLI, or even on Discord. So
Well, you know what it
we
made me
have the
think of, not to
basis.
interrupt you, Alex. I remember in the movie Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey, and he had those robots that were helping him, and he I remember a couple parts in the film, he was like, "I need you to take the humor level up or down," and I thought that was pretty funny. It reminded me of that.
That's actually something I do want to eventually have kind of keyed into this is the ability to have a setting where you can just scrap the personality or say, hey, be full of personality. Right now, it's kind of 50-50, one or the other, but eventually I could see where there would be multiple models built in where it could have kind of a variance, but that's further down the line.
Of course. I mean that's more of a feature than a function. And really what cyber professionals really care about is how functional is this? What is it going to allow me to, force multiply myself as an individual? If you're on a team that's, strapped with personnel, if you have a tool that will help you shorten the amount of time it takes to do an investigation or get to the root cause of something, that's all what people are looking for. So I'm looking forward to see what we're about to do here.
Uh, Last time I checked, Google hasn't changed CEOs, so this is going to be relatively easy.
So this is, of course, hosted on an actual server, right?
Mhm.
Actually, Alex's server in particular, right? And there are a lot of security implications by actually having it truly execute stuff on that server, right? And so an alternative here, right, is being able to host a website like this locally instead on the
Mhm.
person's system and have this be so this is part of this graphical interface here, right? Having the front end here communicate very directly with our Navi CLI in the background as an API to be able to actually execute and run these things. And the other benefit of holding it here in this kind of chat format is because you also have a general history as well going through, and you can have multiple tabs built out so that if you wanted to have multiple investigations going at the same time, in which you normally would, right, you
Mhm.
can pull from that. You have the history, and it's really easy to follow. And so this, even though this is primarily just interfacing with the actual model itself, we really want it to be able to communicate with the command line interface that really actually
Yep.
drives the true investigation, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Could you maybe
Yeah, that's what I
what are some other use cases that for the let's say the entry level cyber person, give us the why and the number one reason why they should take the training on this tool, get acquainted with this tool. What is the big why that you would give someone watching this right now?
I think this is going to be a team up. The My personal opinion on it is one, as we stated before, in terms of being able to use CLI without actually having to know how to use commands per se, that is a big draw. That's a huge draw. I mean, whenever you think about it, you're putting the art of Linux command line administration into English. That's kind of a major thing. There's that, but then there's also the fact that Navi in and of itself is meant to be open source, so it'll continue to have its evolution, it'll continue to get better, and it'll continue to be free. V, anything you want to add to this? I'm sure I'm missing out
Well,
on
yes. I mean,
details.
it's at right at its core, right? We really want to make sure that cybersecurity is as easy and as accessible as possible for people who
There we
need to
go.
use it for, especially for like reconnaissance, any type of professional investigations, right? They have all of these tools at their fingertips, right? For those who want to contribute to the community, they can still build out additions, right?
Hmm.
That interface really cleanly with our application to make the job of anyone who's using this a lot easier, right? If there is something that is missing from the general suite and you wanted to build that out, you totally can and share it with everyone else so that they too can also, enrich their investigation with those tools. So that's really what we're really trying to drive here is cybersecurity, but making it a really accessible assistant where you can ask it general questions, cybersecurity type terminology and methodology. We really try to make sure that there's no assumption here of previous skill, right, going into it, right? Because it can be very intimidating. There's usually a lot of barriers for people. And if somebody has to use cybersecurity tools, right, and they are not really comfortable with it or familiar with it, this should hopefully reduce some of the barrier of entry, I would hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know that Navi is also partnered with the CSI Linux, right? And at some
hmm
point, I would like to see kind of Navi interacting with CSI Linux if that's possible.
As of right now, I actually don't have a copy of the VM on this system.
Okay.
However, going forward, one of the things I will be doing with Rais as Khan is I will be making sure that it is properly working on both sides. However, with that being said, I actually did try to model my system as close as I could to CSI's core operating system. So right now, CSI Linux runs on Xubuntu. I think we're updating it to 24.04 here soon, if not already. So my core system is Xubuntu 24.04. Largely speaking, the same things that you see here, you will be able to see there. We designed it in a way that it's basically really easy to install on anything that's running Debian as a core system. So Debian slash Ubuntu. I kind of use the two interchangeably, even though they're two very separate operating systems running two very separate update cycles, but realistically, they still run on the same package architecture.
Okay. Is there any other facets of Navi that you can demonstrate for us?
You have any ideas off the top of your head? Well, one of the things that we can actually do here through the web UI right now, and this is something I want to figure out how to mimic over on the CLI side, is the ability to do web searches through Navi. So I asked to give me a rundown of the latest cybersecurity news. Granted, this says June 22nd. We're a little bit beyond that at this point. However, the things that it is pulling are actual legitimate articles that you can go out and read Google search, and it will come up with the proper thing for you. So that's one aspect of it that I actually kind of enjoy using, because every now and then I'll come in here and I'll be like, hey, can you give me a rundown on the latest cybersec news? And it'll spit it out for me. On top of that, what else do we have in here?
When it comes to the model that's being built,
Yeah.
That is always the biggest concern, right? Because we really wanted to not have it be too influenced by outside information. We really wanted to ensure that it's being trained on very explicitly as much cybersecurity related terms and methodologies, toolings, and commands on different operating systems as humanly possible. And of course, data curation is one of the most important facets of building a model and being able to make it actually useful. Because if you are an investigator, right, you're trying to, you need information, right? You may need to make sure everything's correct. You don't want it to hallucinate, right?
Yeah.
And making sure that there's enough information that we're providing so that it minimizes that, especially in the education space, right? That's been a huge thing, and that's been a huge issue for me, right? Especially, and a big reason why I think it's very difficult, or actually very irresponsible, right, to have artificial intelligence like as a chatbot for education without having the proper, you know, barriers in place and data curation. So we're trying not to make any of those like core mistakes that we've seen time and time again with other companies just adding AI to add AI without regard for its potential negative impact on those who are using it. It hallucinates so much. It's so confident in all the wrong ways.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure it's at least confident in the correct ways most of the time
Yeah.
it's an algorithm, right? It's a predictive algorithm, so there's no way to make that 100%. We want to make sure it's as close as
Yeah.
possible, especially since the field's more narrow.
It's the basic concept of garbage in, garbage out. So if you can limit how much
Exactly. Right.
misinformation, keep your integrity high on your system, it'll be more
Yes.
reliable for help giving you actionable intelligence or information to make decisions on. I think there's been a lot of talk in the news recently about data scraping and the legalities of that as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And the thing that I usually advise people, a lot of people out there, there's a large group of people that are afraid of AI. Oh, AI is going to replace jobs. Well, of course it will. Just like the robotics industry replaced some jobs in the automotive industry, but there was still people needed to manufacture cars. So technology is not going to go away. And what I would advocate to people is that if you're going to be afraid of the latest, greatest emerging technology, you're not living your life to its fullest. If you think of it as AI as being something that can multiply yourself and your capability, learn it now. Be part of that first wave of new employees that the companies are going to want to hire that know how to use AI, know the proper way to do generative AI because you just can't just type in anything willy-nilly because, again, garbage in, garbage out. You might not get as good of an answer or closer to the more accurate answer if you don't know how to write a proper prompt. And I would advocate for anyone, just do a Google search for, AI generative prompt training, and you'll find 100 plus resources for that. So I'll turn it back to you,
Hmm.
Alex. What do we have going here? So you got a lot of stuff here on the screen.
All right, so I just started doing some basic prompting with it as well. Namely, I was asking it to tell me about quantum cryptography. So, if we couldn't tell by cryptex being included within the Navi ecosystem now, I actually got my core start with programming again with cryptography. Cryptex is actually a tool that I started as a you know how people do write ups for CTFs.
Yep.
So instead of doing a write up for the cryptography side of the CTFs, I would take one encryption that I find per CTF and I would condense it down into a Python script and say, okay, I don't know how this encryption works. Let me build an encryptor decryptor for it. So Cryptex was kind of my answer to the whole write up thing. So I myself don't know a terrible amount of quantum cryptography or how it works or where it's going to end up going. But it's cool that I can turn around and ask Navi, hey, what can you tell me about this? And it will give me a pretty fair assessment of it. Let's see here. In essence, quantum cryptography uses the unique properties of quantum systems to encode and decode messages in a way that make them virtually unhackable. We, of course, don't know how true this is because to this point we haven't seen true quantum cryptography. However, it's quantum, so it's probably correct. Then, following it up, I asked it to make me a basic Python hello world script, which it delivers.
Okay. Well, it's definitely yeah. So what's really nice though is that if you wanted to have some sort of Python, like if you wanted to have build out pretty much anything that you wanted to execute on certain things, or like, oh, if there's Python code, right, that you wanted to generate, they could execute it as well, right? There's lots of ways in which you could expand on the interface, because at its core, it is really just a modular client that you can then engage with and build stuff for. That's pretty much the core of it. So we just want to make sure it's as accessible as possible for people to just build and use it. So if you see something that's missing, by all means, that's something that we can, as a community, work on to establish, especially if it's something like, if something is useful for your workflow, for example.
Okay. I
Yeah,
have to ask the
100%.
question because, seeing the simplicity of being able to just use regular conversational English to get it to perform functions, could someone use Navi for malicious purposes? Is that still a potential that's there?
Oh, of course. Yes. I think that's without a question. There will always be bad actors and potentially, right, that could be a concern, right? Like, hey, we're making it accessible for, good guys to be able to actually go through and hack, right? But since it is open source and it's on GitHub, people could do that.
But that's also
And I
up
know
to
that
the
a disclaimer would
individual, their
prevent
level
people.
of integrity, morals, and ethics as well.
Mhm.
Obviously, you can't have a powerful tool without having like that double-edged sword. It's powerful to
Exactly.
do all these great things to help cyber professional secure our networks and systems, but at the same time, it can also cause harm. Just like a vulnerability scanner. If you don't know what you're doing with a vulnerability scanner, you could deny or service your network. So
Right.
I think it falls in line of the same thing that even our expert systems and our powerful other tools that we have out there already also have the potential that they're misconfigured. They can cause lots of problems for your network, probably
They
most
could.
likely being
Yes.
denial of service. But you showed there where I think you encrypted the hello part. Could you talk about a little bit about the encryption standards and algorithms that you have that's built in? Is it just like is it one encryption? Is it several types? Can you specify the encryption?
Yeah,
Well,
those are all the encryptions that we have so far.
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, I was going to say just that
There's
list.
a lot, and you can build out little QR codes and things like that, and it's all. So this is something that I'd like to also build as a more graphical application, or be able to be a bit more. There's a lot of parameters, right? Yeah. But what's really beautiful, right, is that actually, yeah, I can utilize the same type of what we saw with Nmap, right, where I prompted like basically. Some sort of natural language, and that resulted in a command. I'm only a few lines away from making sure that that's also compatible with something like this, right? This is absolutely something that I could just build out. And that's something that Navi does really, really well, is it provides a lot of functions, like internal functions and tools that that any of the chips, which Navi's a chip, right, could
Mhm.
utilize to gain advantage of that feature, right? Where it can still operate like a typical command line interface with arguments and so on and so forth. But it's not, it's interface, if it's interfacing with Navi, and it tells it to interface in that particular way, we could just translate all those parameters over, right? And so it's like you are basically just, it's almost as if you are typing the command out explicitly with all the parameters, because that's all the
So,
chip cares about, really.
Alex, can you step us through what's going on here? I've seen the screen kind of go and come launch, relaunch, etc.
Yeah, I'm just testing out various functions. So one of the things that I was trying to do here is just kind of go through and see what all we can do. So I think I should probably bring up static encryption as one of the things that is kind of, what's the best way to put this? It's our own homebrew encryption.
Okay.
For this, I'm going to actually need to go out onto the web real quick. So, bible.txt. Now, all of this kind of goes into one major thing. So, let's download raw file. I'm going to plunk this right here in my home directory. Yes, we're going back home. So, cryptex se. So, what's cool about static encryption is it takes each individual character of a text file, for instance, and it encodes it to a colorized pixel. That was rather genius because we didn't realize it at the time, but whenever we started looking into what it was doing to the individual files that we were doing this to, it was actually giving it, I think, a 30% lossless compression rate. So, cryptex se encrypts. We're going to go with input bible.txt. We're going to go output Alex Bible out.png, and we're going to give this an IW of 1500. So that is a lot of data that just went through there.
Yeah.
But what you get for it is static encryption's namesake. It looks like TV static.
Yes.
But that right there is the entire contents of the King James Bible filtered down to colored pixels.
Awesome.
If you ever thought to
Yeah, so it's
yourself you
all
could never
it takes no time to build out these features though and integrate it. So
Mhm.
I think Cryptex already existed as a secondary app that
Mhm.
Alex and others went through and built out.
And
I
just
think
for
it only took me
posterity,
like 2
not to
days.
interrupt you,
Yeah.
Vince, just for posterity, Alex, can you
Yeah.
open up that text file to show people what was in the text file? You know, because a lot of people are like, okay, how do I know what was in that text file? And
Oh
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
and we're going to see a lot of text. So
Yeah. It's the whole Bible.
there
So
it is. Thank you.
And yes, it is the entire thing.
Awesome.
so
So,
no wonder it
gentlemen, is
was
there any
so
other
large.
feature or function of Navi that you want to showcase here on the podcast? And if not,
I mean,
that's
right now,
okay. I do have some more questions for you both that's not directly related to Navi that we can transition to that. But what I would like
Sure.
to is leave an open invitation because I know that there's still a lot of development to increase the functionality
Mhm.
and add more features. And I would love to have you gentlemen back on, especially the when we get the graphical interface done, because I would really like to show folks how easy this is. I mean, a lot of folks may not understand because they see command line and they get very intimidated by it, even though you're asking it questions and we could clearly see live right here that it's doing the work for you. It's doing the heavy lifting for you. You just need to be able to speak a sentence. But I think that later to have you guys back on to show us the graphical interface would be tremendous because it's going to probably make it 100 times even easier than that, which I don't know if that's even possible because this is pretty dang easy in my opinion. But is there another function or feature that you could show, or maybe a function feature that you guys are still working on that maybe you can't show it right now, but you can tell us about it so kind of keep people like excited and interested in following, keeping tabs on this product?
Actually, V, if you want to go into what we're planning with the GUI, go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, as at its core, right? Pretty much all the features that you see here, right, in the CLI interface is going to be translated into a graphical interface so that all system commands would be able to still be executed and visualized with history. That's one of the big things that we are really interested in. Because right now it doesn't remember what is in the past. So if I wanted to basically like pipe the output, right, of another command and use that as a baseline for another tool, right? That is something that is currently lacking in this version and is something that we truly need to have going forward because everything is complicated and we need, you're not just usually running one command, one set of tools to accomplish something. It's usually utilizing a plethora of tools all in conjunction to be able to truly do what you want. And we want Navi to really be that, right? We want it to be an all-inclusive tool. And that's one of the core ways that we're really trying to get it there.
Okay. Alex, if you don't have anything else, I'm going to go ahead and request control.
Yeah, go ahead.
I say, I think you have to give me the control.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'll do. Let's see. Stop
Okay, there we
for
go.
starters.
So,
And
gentlemen,
Nicholas.
I like I said from the get-go, I think I'm very impressed by the whole being able to interact at a command line, just conversational English, and be able to get it to accomplish tasks. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. And I know that there's still work to be done, and it's still going to get even better from there. I do want to ask you guys about some of your thoughts when, every day there's about probably another 100 AI platforms being stood up daily, and it's insane the amount of systems that are out there daily coming online. I know there's a lot of talk and concerns about ethics in AI, and I like when you said earlier about your approach about making sure your data sources have high integrity and that you're trying to keep the focus as a laser focus as possible, and that just shows a very security minded and also valuing data integrity. Can you speak to what your perspectives are on AI and ethics? And I know there's going to be years of laws and ISO standards that'll be stood up for governing AI, and they're still behind the curve, which is unfortunate, but that's how it's always been with technology and legal system. But what are your thoughts on ethics and AI?
Oh wow. Yeah. So when it comes to I really want to see it as human first, right? I want AI to be present in a way that lifts up the individual person so that they can make their lives a little bit easier. And I want to make sure that it's not hampered by it, right? Lots of platforms aren't really building with with the person in mind, really. It's either to completely, whether it's to replace people or be able to not credit people appropriately. It's there's a lot of biases. They're just kind of putting AI into programs for AI's sake without really actually thinking about fundamentally how is the end user going to truly interact with this? What are the core reasons why somebody would want to interact with this? And they're thinking of the short term, right? I really want to try to look at AI in terms of the long term effects of building out a model, integrating to a particular platform, and not only how will somebody like engage with it now, but how would they theoretically be engaging with it like a decade from now, potentially, right? It's a complicated one, right? I'm seeing it done incorrectly in many different ways, and I just don't really want to join those ranks.
I think a
Ultimately,
great
Alex,
recent
do you have any?
example of
Mhm.
emerging technology that was just completely gold rushed for the wrong reasons was NFTs,
Yes.
non-fungible
Oh,
tokens.
Mhm.
I'm a big
I was
Yep.
proponent
excited
of it.
about that when it first came out. Yeah.
The problem is digital artwork. It's great. I mean, I'm not going to doubt the perspective of people that appreciate art, but the problem is that was not the utility of what NFTs can
No,
provide
it
for
wasn't.
people. And I advocate to a lot of folks in the community when we talk about NFTs because like, oh, that's a completely failed technology. I said, well, it'll come back. It just has to possibly be
Yes.
rebranded completely because of the stigma that, oh, NFTs is just a copy, screenshot the
It was just
artwork
a
or the,
speculative
the the dumb
asset.
eight stupid monkey club, whatever the celebrities were into. But the problem with that technology is that too many people rushed in to get rich quick and they inflated that market and then it bubbled and collapsed. And I don't think AI.
Yes.
Obviously, over the next few years, we're going to see a lot of these systems by the hundreds of thousands die off week by week, whether due to lack of funding and support or acceptance by user community. So we'll eventually see the attrition happen in time. But I kind of want to go off on a tangent on NFTs. What people don't realize is that the goal, you mentioned earlier about what is the purpose you're trying to serve for humanity, right? And NFTs missed the mark because people associated it with digital art. And they were like, well, I could just screenshot a picture. Why do I need that? What it was really trying to do for you is give you authenticity. When you go buy a,
Yes.
a signed card from like a Michael Jordan signed rookie card or something, you need to know that you got a certificate of authenticity. And if you bought any kind of sports memorabilia or anything with a signature, you expected to see a certificate of authenticity, a piece of paper. But in our digital world, that's the new authenticity, certificate of authenticity. So I tell people, imagine that you're at brunch one day with your friends, and somehow Prince comes up, and you're just like, "Hey, I was at the last Prince concert that he performed at." And of course, everybody's going to be like, "Bullshit." And nowadays, because of AI, because of all these graphical systems that could Photoshop make you look like you
Yeah.
was there with him, it could even mimic voices and it could mimic anything. Deep fakes and all. We can't trust. The issue with society moving forward in this age is people's ability to trust what they see and what they hear because of AI and other systems like this.
We're
So when I
seeing
tell
Adobe is
people,
implementing that as well,
yeah,
right?
so
Within their
NFTs
platforms.
give you that certificate of authenticity. So let's say you bought a ticket with Ticketmaster, that will now be an
Mhm.
NFT that you go to the concert, it's all on your digital wallet, and you have verifiable experiences from events, concerts. Or let's say you're at brunch and you see someone's rocking a Rolex, you can go check their social media profiles or wherever we will eventually store our NFTs for public views and go, oh, there's an NFT issued to him from Rolex. That is a real Rolex. Or hey, this is rap artist that's got 20 cars. Does he really own all those 20 cars? You go to a social media profile, and that will change the game both for celebrities, wannabe celebrities, and influencers, because then you'll be able to verify what they have and don't. And I know that that's a very materialistic world, but we have to be honest with ourselves. social media has only been a breeding ground for narcissism and flexing and showing off what you got, showing off what your life is. But that's not going to go away because the influencers have won. And so, with that being said, the next thing that people are going to starve for, and that's why I believe live streaming has really taken off in the past 5+ years, because that's as real as it gets. No jump cuts, no edits. It's raw, unedited, and people are craving something that's real and authentic. And that's what NFTs was supposed to give, but unfortunately, it got hijacked by all these people that were trying to
It
get
did.
rich quick, unfortunately, to
Very
the detriment
unfortunate.
of that technology. But when it comes to AI platforms and what you guys are doing, I just want people to be clear. This is one of the good ones, folks. This is a system that it's in partnership with CSI Linux. And just to kind of give a backstory, how I even got connected with these guys, I was on my LinkedIn feed and I saw the founder of CSI Linux had a post. I said, hey, what is a CSI Linux? And from face value, I was like, oh, is this a competitor to Kali Linux? Because that's what it first appeared. But once I started digging a little bit deeper, I was like, no, this is completely different beast than Kali Linux. And so I reached out to some of the folks that were affiliated with it, Alex included, and Irfan, and I ended up having Irfan on the call first. But getting to know what they're trying to do in the world and in the industry, it is so admirable that they're keeping this open source. All these folks, like, even Vincent and Alex could have easily just proprietized, compiled their code and just said, no, we're not doing open source anymore, which I can name countless companies that have taken open source software, put a GUI on it, and made hundreds of millions of dollars in industry, which is sad to see. But when you see guys like this, they're not doing it for the glory, the profits, and just namesakes. They're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I just want to take that moment just to applaud the work that you guys are doing on this. And again, I meant what I said earlier. You guys have an open invitation at any point to come back on the podcast and show me the latest and greatest that your tools will keep developing into. But not to take too much time away, Alex, I wanted the same question to you. I'll give you a moment to address ethics in AI.
So one of the core things that I believe going forward we're going to see is more augmentation of human to AI and vice versa. I feel like that should be the next logical step. So getting ahead of that bell curve is kind of a little bit of what I'm trying to aim for. Like I know I'm aiming for about 30 billion different things with this project, but at the end of the day, it should be an augmentation of our cybersecurity workforce's ability to rely on artificial intelligence to provide correct, concise answers to questions.
Okay.
So there's
So,
that whole aspect, but then there's also the extension system. So that's where it stays relevant. It's not just artificial intelligence anymore, it's a whole ecosystem that we're trying to build into this thing. That's fantastic, in my opinion, because now
when
you have the
Irfan,
AI augmentation. Hmm?
When Irfan was kind of listing, and I kind of got a short list, and this is a short list of the capabilities that CSI Linux with Navi and everything built in. It can do OSINT. I mentioned OSINT, social media, malware investigations, network monitoring, encryption. There was still a longer list than what I just named here. And that right there off the bat is some powerful tools. And to hear Irfan talk about, hey, it's just you click what you want to start your case file, what do you want to do? And then it guides you through the right tool for the thing you're trying to accomplish. And earlier I think Vincent, you might have been the one to mention that there's just a sea of tools out there. There's so many tools that are very powerful tools, and if you don't know how to use them, it can be detrimental. Or if you use if you use a hammer when you need a screwdriver, or vice versa, you're not going to be as effective in trying to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. So when you have a tool that will guide you to the right tools that you need to do the right job, I think that's a huge step in the right direction for the cyber industry. I want to give a moment though to talk about what are some sites, and of course, message me the sites, guys, and I'll put them in the description below. But what are some sites or socials that Vincent, Alex, people can connect to you, follow with the work that you're doing, your own business websites, as well as any other socials that people can connect to you guys and follow the amazing work that you guys are doing.
Oh yeah, there's definitely the LinkedIn, the GitHub. There's Vincent's LinkedIn. There's mine. There's the Saint Security Group LinkedIn. There's the
Mhm.
CSI LinkedIn. It kind of all flows into that,
We'll see me on GitHub a
as
lot. I
well.
think all my links are there too.
Okay.
And there's also the Discords as well, because everybody likes talking.
Everybody likes talking. Is there any closing words on the AI and the future AI? And again, put your perspective that you're talking to someone that's brand new to this, that what they've heard has been negative so far, and they're fearful of it, and or they're just scared of just IT because they figured I can't understand this stuff. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would. So for AI in general, um, at the end of the day, it is a predictive algorithm. It has its limitations. It is in no way something that would, it's not in any way gonna take over the world or anything. It is just a really specific, a tool for a specific purpose. Generative AI is really has some really specific use cases. Deep learning, machine learning, right? All those umbrella terms, they all have really specific uses. We're nowhere near anything that would be, Elon Musk says, in 1 year. Impossible, completely impossible. He's just pulling that out of thin air. So for now, we can enjoy it. We can take AI as it in its current form and hopefully enhance our life, enhance some of our productivity, some of our creativity, and hopefully we can just do things cooler and faster and not fret about it yet. We're
Okay.
probably many decades away from actually fretting. And this is the perfect moment to talk about ethics and AI now, because there's plenty of room for how AI and everything is implemented now and when it truly becomes problematic, right? So this is, I would say, not to worry now. Totally overblown. That's what AI companies want you to believe. They want you to feel like they're on that kind of cutting edge, kind of get you kind of paranoid and get the buzz talking, right? Because we see that all the time. People are just talking about AI and everything in such a fearful way, and none of it's founded in any reality. It's just to get shares and clicks and things like that. But talking to AI researchers, everything is so much more grounded, and there's a really common mindset. And I don't know, just embrace it, have fun, and that's kind of it.
Okay. Anything to add, Alex?
Honestly, I agree with everything that V is saying here. I mean, right now in our current juncture of history, we're at a really good crossroads with this, in my opinion. And part of the many reasons why I want to keep Navi as open as possible is because it's here's the transparency, here's what we're doing, here's how this works.
Our sources should also be transparent as in terms of how we're training the model. Being held
Yep.
accountable for that is super important.
And that right there,
Hmm.
I think, folks, right, we got the magic statement right there at the end. Transparency and security, and in any type of data aggregation and collection, is everything. And that's what it aligns to regulations and laws by international standards, U.S. standards, you name it. Transparency is key. And the fact that these guys had that mindset going in, building up the system, meant that they had a global vision and perspective in mind when they stood it up, and not just to make a quick buck. It's open source, so they're not trying to make a quick buck. So their hearts are in the right place, their brains are in the right place, they got the right focus, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this grows into and becomes. And I definitely want to have you guys back on this podcast. With that, I would like to thank you guys for your time. I know it's very valuable, and this has been a great demonstration. So thank you both.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.